See, it's stuff like this that gives me trust issues.
Welcome to the Trust Issues podcast. We have trust issues with the traditional society-dictated path, with the status quo, with the whole get an education, land a job, and work tirelessly until you're 6 feet under. It's time to upgrade your life with the help of us. I'm Erica.
And I'm Kyle Auckland. We're a husband and wife duo, but we're also entrepreneurs, biohackers, and business builders.
Every week, we're dedicated to having purposeful conversations with each other and leading experts on topics like wellness, relationships, and entrepreneurship.
Subscribe to Trust Issues Podcast if you're looking for bold topics, honest dialogue, and valuable lessons.
Welcome back to another episode of the Trust Issues Podcast. I'm your host, Erica Auckland, and I am so honored and thrilled to introduce you to a very special guest today, Loren Sofia, who had a huge part in my own pregnancy journey, my own conception journey, and preconception too. And so after healing herself from birth control, Loren knew she wanted to empower women and men with the tools and knowledge to optimize their fertility and their well-being, putting their best foot forward as they step into a thriving pregnancy, a resilient postpartum, and a joyful parenthood. Her methodology is rooted in deep understanding and respect for the physiology of the body, combining wisdom of traditional nutrition with bioenergetic, pro-metabolic, and bio-individual approach. And she's going to talk to us today all about how to prep for pregnancy, all of the top burning questions that you have around what you can do, supplements you can take, should you exercise during pregnancy, what about a prenatal, all the things that will help you thrive during pregnancy, and how to have a really resilient postpartum experience. And I have personally worked with her for years now, and she's changed my life in so many ways. And so I'm excited to introduce you to her. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Erica. I'm super excited to be here, and I appreciate the incredibly thoughtful introduction.
So excited to have you. And I've literally promoted your page and your work for years now. And when I knew we were going to start the podcast, you were one of the first people that I told my husband. I was like, we are going to interview her. Unfortunately, he couldn't be here today. So I'm actually really excited and lucky because I feel like we just get to have a one-on-one girl chat about pregnancy, about hormones, about all the things. But you were literally one of the first people that I thought of when we were going to start Trust Issues. So it's kind of like a full circle moment for me today. So thanks for being here.
Oh my gosh, my pleasure.
Okay, let's dive in because there are so many questions that I have for you, and I know so many questions that my audience has for you. And really your specialty and how I found you on social media was when I was personally myself also going through a lot of things. Your journey of getting off the pill. I had been on the pill for years. I was still dealing with symptoms. I was dealing with acne, weight gain. I felt really irritable. I was doing a lot of what I thought was healthy for me, eating a ton of nut butters. I was juicing kale. I was doing all these things that I thought were healthy, but I was not feeling my best whatsoever. And I had actually had a couple practitioners, doctors tell me, that I might have a challenging time getting pregnant because of some of the hormonal stuff that I was dealing with. And that kind of freaked me out because I think, this is such a conversation. Fertility is a huge conversation. I think more and more women are realizing that their fertility is maybe not where they wanted it to be when they started getting pregnant or trying to get pregnant. And that's where I was. And that's how I stumbled upon your work and just felt like what you were doing was so different and so against what I had thought was healthy, and not in a negative way, in such an empowering way. So if we can just start diving in at the beginning, in terms of a woman's fertility, because I think if you're listening to this episode right now, and maybe you're thinking, I'm not ready to get pregnant yet, but I know if I do get pregnant one day, I don't want this to be some overwhelming, scary thing. What are some beginning things that women should understand when it comes to taking control of their own fertility and taking control of their own hormonal health?
That is a loaded question.
I knew it would be, but I knew you could handle it.
Yeah. So I think the first thing is doesn't even have to do with anything that you can check off a list. I think it really starts with getting in tune with your own body and really taking ownership of that, because we've been conditioned by all kinds of systems, by society, to really not trust our bodies, to outsource them, our health to others, to outsource our fertility, to kind of, let other people tell us how we feel and let other people tell us, how well we are versus actually being in tune with that and following our intuition. And so I think that establishing that reconnection, while it's not, super simple or easy necessarily, many people are on a different spectrum of that entire bodily literacy, awareness, in-tuneness. But if you can start to establish that, and really, it also starts with taking ownership of your own health, because no one's going to care about your health more than you do. No one's going to care about your baby's health more than you do. And no one's going to have to live with the decisions that you make except for you. So, I think understanding that can really help you become empowered. And it can seem scary, kind of like jumping off a cliff, but, I think really understanding that you are the decision maker, not somebody else. And you have skin in the game in every decision that you make, whether you are making it or not. You have to live with the consequences. And they can be amazing consequences. They can be incredible consequences. Like, when I say consequences, they're not bad, it can be a really positive thing. And as soon as I started taking charge of my own health and really becoming more in tune with my body, that's when I started to see things really shift for myself. That's what I see with all my clients too. So just, I think what I would say first is to really see success for the long game, because health is not just a temporary thing. It's a journey. You want to foster and cultivate health for your lifetime. You want to foster and cultivate fertility for your lifetime. So it's not just a temporary thing. Don't look at it as just like this short-term thing. Building this skill and honing it in is going to be really beneficial for you, not only for you to get pregnant, but as you come across decisions that you have to make for your child, as they grow, as you get older. So that's kind of what I would say first. And I don't know if you have any follow-up questions about that.
That's such a good answer, because I think at the end of the day, you could go on social media, have one person say one thing, another person say another thing. But if you want true health, and that's what I discovered, it was really like me coming back to myself and like learning a personal awareness that I honestly never had, and they don't teach you to have. Society doesn't want you to really have that type of a relationship for yourself. You have to fight for it, but it's what changed my life, and it's what changed the trajectory of my own health. So I have plenty of follow-up questions to that. So let's dig into like the preconception journey, right? So when you work with someone who is now deciding, I want to maybe get pregnant now or in the next year, what are some of the first things that they should do, and why should they prep for conception? I think that this is something that I kind of grasped before I worked with you, but not fully. I didn't really understand why I should do preconception work, and how the things I was eating or the way that I was living before I decided to get pregnant was going to impact my pregnancy, was going to impact my child's health. So maybe let's start there on why preconception work is so important, and what are some of the basic things that every woman can do to prep for pregnancy.
Absolutely. So the why behind preconception prep really comes down to a couple of things, but what really drew me to this work was being able to influence not just your health as the mother, but your child's health and your child's health, if that makes sense. So the health that you have at the time of conception ripples into future generations, not just your baby's health. It ripples into at least 2 generations into the future. And, I think it's
That's
amazing.
mind-blowing.
Yes.
That's literally mind-blowing. Like, my decisions are impacting not only my child, but his children.
Dawson's children, yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So, and for me as a practitioner, that's amazing, because I can help 3 people at least, if not more, by helping one person, one woman. So for me, it's a really, really awesome experience to be able to do that and help women set themselves up that way. So there's that aspect. And I think that's why, the nutrition aspect, that's why your nervous system, that's why your hormonal health, that's why your environmental toxin status. These things all get imprinted onto your children and can influence their health starting from the moment of conception. So not necessarily once they're out of the womb and, they start growing, although there is a lot of opportunity still then to really influence their health positively, but it starts when the sperm meets the egg and the embryo is formed and starts growing. So just, kind of putting into perspective, which makes all the work that you do, which it doesn't have to be anything crazy. Like, I think people think about preconception and they get overwhelmed. And, I think it's just little shifts here and there. It doesn't have to be this whole like new lifestyle that you adopt. It's really about finding ways to enhance what you're doing already in a way that will support your lifestyle. And sure, if you find that you gravitate towards like a completely different way of being and doing things, like, go for it. Change is good. We're always evolving, but you don't have to uproot your whole life, basically, is what I'm trying to say, to see benefits or to have positive changes into what I'm talking about, these future generations. So there's that aspect, and the imprinting aspect is really huge because you can imprint so many things, nutritional deficiencies, nutritional excesses, heavy metals, hormone imbalances, things like that. So that's why I think, really sort of not just fixing these things necessarily, but making the best version of yourself, whatever that means, can really be so powerful. And that's what I think it's more about than like, having perfect mineral status or having perfect vitamin status or having perfect hormone balance. It's creating the best version of you so that you can pass that on to your child and your grandchildren. So I feel like that is really, for me, the crux of it all. But that said, by preparing for pregnancy, with all that comes with it, including, cycle awareness, nutrition, lifestyle changes, exercise, which we can talk about, and I can break down a couple more. You can get pregnant faster, so you're optimizing your fertility so that when you do try, it's not really trying. It's like, okay, you can conceive. Like I don't know if you want to share your story, but for me, for example, I had been preparing that when I went to quote unquote try, I was able to get pregnant for the first try with my husband. And I know that, that's not always the case for a lot of women. And please know that that's not, supposed to happen necessarily. It's not supposed to happen that way for everyone. There's a certain, average that's normal. So don't get down on yourself if you didn't get pregnant the first time or if you're still trying. But, it can really help ease yourself into that process so that when you do try, it's not really trying and you're not like finding out later after multiple months of trying that there's something wrong. It's about kind of getting ahead of that, knowing what your strengths and your weaknesses are so that you can optimize them so that when you go ahead and try, it's, you have the best possible scenario happening. So that's part of it. And then pregnancy complications. So there's so much literature now and more coming out that shows that prenatal care can really help reduce the risk of pregnancy complications, including gestational diabetes, preterm birth, excess weight gain during pregnancy, things like that can really make things uncomfortable, but also put you in a situation where you're having to make a really stressful and scary decision, or maybe taking your ideal birth off the table that you had dreamed of and worked so hard for. And now because of this pregnancy complication, you have to give birth somewhere else or you can't have the type of birth that you want. So that can really help. Preconception prep can really help with that as well. We're just reducing the risk. And also, especially if you've had pregnancy complications with a previous pregnancy, or, if it kind of like runs in your family, quote unquote, that, your mom had preeclampsia. So for example, preeclampsia for me was a really big focus for my pregnancy prep. And my mother had preeclampsia with me and also with my youngest brother. So I was 5 pounds, 11 ounces. My youngest brother was born 2 months early because it was an emergency. Like she had it so bad. So that was a really big focus for me specifically in the context of like my heritage and like my lineage and what I wanted to focus on. And so it doesn't necessarily, again, there's a lot of personalization that can come with preconception prep and intentional things based on your history and your family's history as well. And then there's the postpartum period too. So, really not only having a smooth labor and delivery, which a lot of the preconception stuff can help, especially if you take it into pregnancy, especially the pelvic floor stuff, but also postpartum, just being able to heal, because pregnancy and delivery, they're very demanding physically, and being able to heal your physical body, but also support yourself during the mental side of things as you make this transition. And everyone's journey is different. Don't get me wrong, but it's about really sort of stacking the cards in your favor as much as you can to support yourself as you go through these changes. And you will come against, things. It's not about, saving you from any hardships or any complicated decisions, but it's about really helping support the best possible outcomes and empowering you to feel confident in your decisions as well. So, and then, you have your baby's health, of course, which I talked about first, but that's also one of the biggest parts. You want a healthy baby. If everyone wants a healthy baby, and to really, make the healthiest human possible. And pregnancy prep can really help build your nutrient stores and get all that ready so that when you are pregnant, you're not pulling from your bones for calcium. You're not, in a deficiency where your baby's pulling stuff from your brain. It's all there and readily available because your baby will be able to pull from your nutrient stores. So I guess that's kind of like the breakdown of why it's important. At least in my eyes, I think there's so much opportunity. And I do want to mention too that it's not just about you, it's about your partner. So keep that in mind.
Please talk on this.
If, pregnancy prep is not just for women, it's for men too. And, your partner's health at the time of conception will influence his sperm health. And that is 50% of the picture when it comes to the embryo and your baby. And so this is not just for women, although, women tend to take more ownership of this process naturally. And I think it's really important to just get that across, and your partner's health and your partner should be preparing alongside you to optimize his sperm quality, to optimize his testosterone production, to really get ahead of any health issues that he has. Because if he's suffering from insulin resistance, for example, or thyroid issues, or, anything like that, that can influence your baby's health, but also your pregnancy. There's actually a lot of evidence that shows that, his sperm quality at the time of conception can influence whether or not you develop something like preeclampsia. So it's not just you working the pregnancy route. It's like both him and you. And that's really important to keep in mind.
That's so mind-blowing, because of course that would make sense. But where are the, advocates out there besides yourself who are talking about the men's health and how that can impact the woman's pregnancy? I mean, you don't hear that talked about ever. It's like, oh, he had one job, but it's like, no, there's so much more involved in that. I feel like there's so much to unpack here, but I just want to back it up for a second and say that I can attest to what you're saying is true, because, we started working together. It was middle of 2020, actually, which is crazy to think. And you really helped me. I mean, I remember the first time I drank raw milk was when you and I were working together. Like, I was dairy free for all these years. I had so much food fear that I wasn't nourishing myself with. It was very much restriction. And so you helped me heal a lot of those things. And I didn't get pregnant until it was April of 2021. So it was almost nearly a year that we worked together, and we worked together on supplementation, on whole food nutrition, on, just nervous system regulation. And that's a whole nother thing we need to dive into, because I think that plays such a huge role. And when I did get pregnant, I got pregnant on the first try. Like, we weren't even trying. I knew that there was a high probability. I'd taken an ovulation test. There was a very high probability that I would get pregnant. I actually, the ovulation test said it was negative, but I know my body, and I learned so much about my body through the process of us working together that I could feel when I was ovulated. I could feel when I was in my luteal phase. I was feeling these different things because I was creating awareness around it, around my cycle that I'd never created before. And so when we went to go and quote unquote try, which we both were like, well, we'll see what happens. I did get pregnant on the first time and ended up having a dream pregnancy. And I didn't have a lot of the things that people say that you have during pregnancy. And again, I know every woman's different and everyone has different cards that they're dealt with and things, but I think it is so empowering to know there's so much that you can do. And there's so much that you can do to influence how it's going to go. And I'm just so grateful for that. Can we talk a little bit about the nervous system stuff? Because I know we're going to get into nutrition, but I think this is something that for me personally, I was so good at before when we first started working together, checking boxes. If you say eat 3 meals a day, eat a snack, these are your food groups, here's some recipes, I will check those boxes better than anyone. But what I wasn't good at was the nervous system stuff. And this was something that I learned when we started working together. Grounding, getting my feet in the ground, like, exposing myself to red light therapy, like, turning off my laptop, blue light stuff, like, having practices in my day to regulate my nervous system. Can you talk about how that plays a role? And also, what are some top things that women can start to do if this is very new to them? Because I think this is a huge part. I felt very calm pregnant, but I think if I would have gotten pregnant like 2 years before or a year before, I would have been like a psycho. Like I felt so grounded. I felt so just like ethereal. And I really honestly think it was so much of what we did in terms of nervous system work.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for sharing that. I appreciate that so much. I think there are so many aspects to the nervous system where what works for one person won't necessarily work for another person. So like what worked for you, may not be the trigger button for somebody else. So I just want to make that clear. Like there's no like right or wrong way to do this because some people will benefit more from an environmental change while others might benefit more from sort of like internal to external change, if that makes sense. So, it sounds like a lot of what worked for you or to like, I guess, interpret for the audience, what worked for you was more of like an external to internal change. I'm not, and I'm kind of like, these are not formal terms. This is just kind of like my perception of it. So in case anyone's like trying to Google what I'm saying, like this, just trying to describe it in like layman's terms. But the nervous system plays such a huge role. And I think that we could go so deep on this, but it's basically, you have something called the vagus nerve that runs from your brain to basically your pelvic, the end of your pelvic floor. And it controls your fight or flight. So like whether your body perceives you're running from a bear or you're like, running from a warring tribe, it's a very primitive sort of on-off switch. And we have to be able to go from stressed to not stressed, and that change, that shift should be able to happen very easily and naturally and smoothly. What happens, or what's happening now in our society, is like we get stuck with the on button in this fight or flight state, and there are so many things that could influence this being stuck on. So like, not eating enough, of course, relationships, how you live throughout the day, the light exposure, things like that too. But this is really important because your baby will inherit your nervous system sort of like imprint. That's why there's, it's kind of like a survival mechanism. So your body is trying to prepare your baby to be able to handle what you're dealing with environmentally. And if your body perceives that it's stressed, out of, basically trying to help your baby survive, it will help your body sort of imprint your nervous system onto that baby. So when they come out of the womb, they can handle the same stressors. And so if we're constantly perceiving tons of stress, like our baby's probably going to have a nervous system very similar to ours. So that's just like kind of like the survival way that the body works. But, I think the nervous system, it plays a huge role in being able to get pregnant too. This vagus nerve, and that's why so many reproductive disorders like endometriosis and like PCOS, they have poor vagal tone, which means that the vagus nerve is not operating correctly. And that's proven in the literature. And they're actually like trying to make devices that improve vagal tone for endometriosis because of it. So
whoa,
it's wild what they're trying to do. But the nervous system is innately the vagus nerve. And so again, it's about perceiving and reacting to stress and being able to go from we should be able to handle stress. We won't be able to avoid stressors in our lifetime. That's just impossible. And we shouldn't avoid stress. I mean, it's going to be naturally coming up. It's just about how we handle it. And again, it's being able to shift from that, stressed to not stressed state and really improve our ability and regulation and sort of like resiliency to it. So there are so many things that you can do for that. And again, fertility plays a huge role in that, just being able to get pregnant. If your body also thinks it's stressed and there's a war or there's a famine, your body perceives stress pretty much the same way regardless of what it is. So if your body thinks it's stressed, it's not going to be a good time to reproduce. And then it might just kind of like automatically downregulate or like decrease a reproductive activity to save you from having to carry a baby in, a not safe time, quote unquote. So I kind of wanted to explain that as well, because it can play a role in pregnancy as well. So there's so many ways that it can affect fertility in general. But a couple of like really basic things that you can do to support your nervous system. Well, one, I think that getting in nature, that's just the most it sounds, kind of like woo-woo, maybe tree hugger, but honestly, there's also tons of literature to support this as well. Humans have a natural affinity for being in nature. It's also Mother Nature's fertility and like being able to get more into our femininity as women when trying to reproduce and trying to conceive. That's automatically going to be helpful for our nervous system. So just kind of wanted to put it out there, and just listening to the birds. So like, I know you're listening to this podcast right now, but maybe if you do go for a walk later in your day, or like you maybe you listen to podcasts while you walk, maybe choose one day that you don't listen to a podcast and you just listen to whatever is going on around you. And luckily I live in a place that's pretty quiet, so this might be more difficult if you live like in New York City, but being able to take in the sounds of nature will automatically calm your nervous system. The birds, the grasshoppers, the wind rustling, the grass. Like, it sounds so simple, but honestly, it really does work. Another thing I would say is also balancing your blood sugar. That is a huge one, and I think it's really the cause of a lot of women's anxiety, especially throughout their cycle. And, unregulated, dysregulated blood sugar, especially low blood sugar, can really cause anxiety. You're not going to be able to, well, first of all, your stress hormones are going to increase because they also increase blood sugar. So your body's just trying to regulate itself by increasing these stress hormones. But it won't let you utilize your sex hormones properly, and specifically progesterone, because stress hormones will block receptor sites for progesterone, which you need to get pregnant. So that sort of, you might be making enough progesterone, but you might not even be utilizing it properly. And especially in the second half of your cycle. So this is when women experience PMS, anxiety, really depressive symptoms. Typically, that could be a blood sugar issue, because we also experience crazy metabolic changes in that phase of your cycle too. You need to be balancing your blood sugar a lot more carefully in the second half of your cycle. And as soon as you start to take care of that, you might feel like a brand new person. So I would say that that's a huge one as well. And then I would say breathing is another one. And that's probably my last one I'll talk about. So, you might notice that, at least I do, I've noticed this with myself, but also people that I just observe, we have really short and shallow breaths. And so it's like almost like we're hyperventilating throughout the day. And some of us might even be breathing through our mouths, which is automatically going to turn on that fight or flight sort of switch of our nervous system. And that will keep us in a chronically stressed state and make our body feel unsafe. Not to mention it has really long-term repercussions. So, I know this is probably more common with your partner if you're a female listening to this, but it really has long-term repercussions in terms of like high blood pressure, mouth and jaw formation, and like muscle tone. So there's so many things, but being able to regulate your nervous system through breathing is a really powerful way to manually regulate your nervous system. So like, regardless of what happens or what somebody says to you, you can take control of that by breathing through your nose and out through your mouth, in through your nose and out through your mouth, and making sure they're really deep breaths and really practicing expanding your lungs in a 360 way. So not just breathing from your chest or from your belly alone, really breathing from both your belly, your chest, and expanding wide into your rib cage. That's really going to allow you to get more inhaled breathing and really down regulate your nervous system in a positive way, and to really take control. So those are kind of like and those are all very manual things. I mean, you could also seek therapy. There are so many other ways to also manually regulate your nervous system, but those are like my top 3, I'd say, that are pretty easy, low-hanging things.
And those are like my top 3 favorites, because literally I can look back and I could like pinpoint the times when I started to do those things. It's so funny. I look at the person I was when I first started working with you, and I would just be like connected 24/7. I never unplugged. I was constantly on social media. I was constantly posting. And I look back at that person and was like, was she okay? Like, she was not okay. Now I'm like, all I want to do is be in nature, going on a walk every single day as part of my day. I rarely am like plugged in for more than a few hours at a time, and just getting in nature is so healing. Literally took the whole summer to go and just be in nature. And I know that that's not doable for everyone, but if you're listening, like just finding those little moments. And then I will say to breath work too. I've also done a lot of work on like balancing my blood sugar, being aware of that. But then I got a continuous blood glucose monitor, and that was so insightful because now I can feel it. I can feel just looking when I was like so out of touch with my body. Again, like it's just so much of it is awareness. That helped. But the breath work, like I will say breath work helped me so much postpartum, because I look back at my postpartum and I thought I took a lot of time to rest, but I didn't. I was like really trying to work from Wi-Fi and be like plugged in while I was in bed. And I didn't take a lot of like mental time to just unplug and disconnect and rest and recover, which is so important. And so I dealt with a lot of postpartum anxiety. Like I never dealt with anxiety in my life. And that was crazy. Intrusive thoughts, anxiety, like waking up in the middle of the night with crazy thoughts, just feeling like I couldn't get in control of my heart rate. And I started doing breath work and changed my life. Like so good. So I can attest to these things, like they work. I'm geeking out over this conversation so much right now. This is so good. And I think this brings us to like the next conversation, which I think everybody wants to know is like, okay, nutrition, what do I need to do to prep? And I love this too, because again, like if you're listening and you're like, whoa, this is all new for me, and I'm feeling like I got to change my whole life tomorrow. Like, where do I start? One thing I love about what you teach is how it all connects. It's like what you do to prep for pregnancy is also how you can have a thriving pregnancy, and also how you can heal postpartum. And so it's all connected. It's not like, okay, now we need to change it all up and eat different. It's like, no, you're eating the same, do the same things. It's a practice and it's a way of being and it's a way of life. So if you're like, well, I don't even know where to start. It's like, okay, if you can just start with little things now, you're going to do this for the rest of your life, and it'll change everything about your life. Like it's not just doing it preconception and then pregnancy. It's like you do it all the time. But so nutrition, the biggest conversation I feel like everyone wants to know, it's like, what the heck do I eat? There's so much conflicting information. Should I be downing green juices? Should I be eating salads? Like this is so what is in my inbox. So many people are saying like, where do I start? I feel so overwhelmed when it comes to what I eat. What do you start your clients with?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I hope that even with this question, it's pretty clear that like nutrition isn't the only thing that will influence a healthy pregnancy, healthy children. So just in case anyone was still wondering that. But nutrition is very important. And it really depends on where my client is at. So I have some clients that I've started with that are eating Taco Bell every day.
My gosh, stop doing that if you're listening. Oh my gosh, I'll say it. I'm not the expert, but I will say it. Oh my gosh, you'll feel so much better.
Or not, and Taco Bell is like not the worst one either, but I think it's so I've run the gamut. Or I've worked with a lot of women eating like what they think is supposed to be healthy, but it's got a lot of gaps. And that's not to say like if you like the way you eat, it's wrong. But it's about sort of tweaking things and then maybe adding things that can balance and enhance what you're giving your body, because that will serve as the building blocks for your baby as well. Not only for the health of your eggs and the health of your sperm, but your baby too, once they start growing in your womb. So your nutrition in pregnancy is exclusively what's giving that baby nutrition. And so I just wanted to make sure that was clear too. So your diet is pretty important. I think, really simply, whole foods are really important. And that might be like a no-brainer, but shopping the outside of the supermarket is going to be much more beneficial than shopping the inside of the supermarket. Fresh foods, fresh produce, fresh cuts of meat, things like that. That said, there are great staples in the middle of the aisles. Like there's canned fish and stuff like that, and beans, which are also really great. But really prioritizing freshness and whole foods are really important. I think also proper preparation is another key part. So, and I think this is also missed, especially if you're somebody that drinks a lot of green juices and eats kale salads, is that a lot of plant foods, including nuts, grains, seeds, legumes, they all have what's called anti-nutrients. So some compounds that basically are there to ward off predators from eating them. They don't really want to be eaten. And so these compounds are important because not only can they create digestive discomfort and stress, so like they can really irritate your gut, but they actually make it so that if you're eating, for example, pumpkin seeds, because they have zinc content, like high zinc, you're not getting all the zinc in there, probably not very much to begin with. So they really make it so that you don't get all the nutrients that you think you're getting. And so proper preparation, and that is very different from food to food, but learning how to do this is really important, because then you'll make sure that regardless, because these foods are still very healthy, they still provide a lot of nutrition, and they can still be part of a really balanced diet. Like I love beans. I grew up eating black beans. I'm half Cuban. And if you try to take my beans away from me, I will probably hurt you. But
being a Colombian girl, being a girl with a Colombian mother, I will attest to that. White rice and beans, like any type of bean, I don't discriminate. I love beans. And you'll actually be really proud to know that I'm actually soaking rice right now for dinner tonight. I started soaking it early this morning in some really good filtered water with some vinegar. So we're breaking down the rice to make it for tonight for dinner. So you taught me all about that.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, I love hearing that. Yeah. Soaking rice as well. So like the different grains will have different time periods for soaking or sprouting, depending on what you're doing. So, it's important to find out exactly what that is and how to prepare that specific food. But for example, like white rice, I have a reel on this on my page somewhere. At least 7 hours with a little bit of water and some acid, so either lemon or apple cider vinegar or some type of vinegar, and you let it soak, and then you drain it, and then you cook it. And if you don't want it to be mushy, you just reduce the water that you then cook with. So stuff like that. And that's going to not only help you increase your nutrient stores, because that's why you're eating food, right? Well, one of the reasons. You're trying to build your nutrient stores for pregnancy. And so that's going to help you do that, but it's also going to decrease the digestive irritation that you might have. So if you get constipated or if you have stomach aches or get gassy or bloating, it's going to reduce that too. And then there's also the blood sugar component. Like, I think a lot of people don't realize, or, you know, they will kind of brush off the proper preparation or soaking or sprouting or even fermentation. Like, there's so many preparation methods you can utilize. But it also helps with your blood sugar balance. And like, you will have far less blood sugar spikes and a more balanced blood sugar release post-meal by doing this too. So there's lots of benefits for that. And blood sugar is really important for fertility. Your digestion is really important for fertility. So it all connects in that way. I think also balancing blood sugar, just going back to that, is really important. So making sure and this will be very different depending on someone's insulin resistance or insulin sensitivity, I should say, you know, exactly how many carbs you eat. But one thing is for sure is always have protein at every meal. Protein is really important for women. And I cannot tell you how little most women come to me eating protein. And, you know, it's funny because my mother-in-law will also say, well, spinach has protein. And I will just laugh.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm talking
we
about.
love you, mother-in-law, but like, yeah, that was something too that I learned because I was like, oh, well, like you can get protein from beans or protein from plants. And it's like, you talking about the bioavailability of it, which is a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, and the ratios too. So like, you know, those foods, while they might have protein, they also have a high amount of carbohydrates. And they're also not complete proteins. So that's why most vegetarians have to have grains and legumes together to make that work. So the most bang for your buck, the in terms of a portion, and, you know, without the anti-nutrients and just like being able to be really easily digested. And if you do have issues digesting animal protein, then that's a whole other conversation. But animal foods are going to be the biggest bang for your buck. They're not only protein rich, they're also really loaded in lots of minerals and vitamins. Mm-hmm. So if you're trying to build your nutrient stores in a really efficient way and also trying to balance your blood sugar, making sure you're having some type of animal protein at every meal. I like to have at least 25 to 30 grams of protein at every meal. And then you can play with the other macronutrients, which are like carbohydrates and fat, depending on what your meal looks like. And that is really everything, kind of like everyone has a different way of how those two work for them. But protein as a baseline, you must get, that works for everyone. And so making sure you're getting enough protein is going to be really important. And then, you know, the types of foods that you're eating, I mean, really focusing on nutrient dense foods, like, and a lot of those are going to be animal foods, but muscle meats, but also like eating nose to tail. So the collagenous cuts that are maybe tougher, but make beautiful stews, or bones that make beautiful broths, really varying those things because those are also really dense in anti-inflammatory nutrients. And then you have organ meats that are just like the multivitamins of nature, especially liver. They're incredible for you, and you only need a little bit. I'm not saying to go eat a plate of like liver and onions. Just like eat a little bit, throw it in some like ground meat, and you're good to go. And shellfish is amazing. Dairy is amazing. Eggs are amazing. You know, you really just incorporating more of these foods can really, even just a couple of times a week, can be really, really beneficial.
Mm-hmm. And that's something that we started, you know, when we started changing, and I say we, my husband and I, because we started doing this together, because if I'm going to cook, we're going to cook the same thing, right? So we went from eating a ton of ill-prepared grains and dairy-free cheeses and just stuff that I'm like, that's not even food. We were eating that way, just having so many digestive issues, both really gassy, both just not feeling our best, bloated all the time after every single meal. And then we started changing, and it was like, okay, in the morning I was eating, instead of having one egg or, you know, just so low protein, I was eating 2 eggs, a big scoop of cottage cheese mixed in my eggs with a big cup of like, raw milk with it, or some type of like, bacon or sausage, or like just having a real freaking meal. And then for lunch, again, making it around protein. And like I would do a little snack plate of, maybe some pastured chicken with some cheese, like raw cheese, and would smother that in like honey and like with fruit. And it was like, I felt like I was eating for the first time, or like a piece of sourdough with butter on it. And then our meals, like having stews. And, I remember like we were trying to stay away from fatty cuts of meat. And we were like, oh, we're not going to have these things because they're not good for you or whatever. And then we started eating that. And it's like, I literally feel like I came alive. And it's like everything that you're talking about, the like nutritious foods, eating nose to tail. We started having liver. Like I felt like I started to come alive. I literally look at photos of myself from how I used to eat. And my face was like gaunt, pale. Like I just looked like I didn't have life in me. And I look at myself now and it's like a completely different person. And so it's like, it's true. Like the way that you eat, not only does it going to impact you, obviously impacts your pregnancy, but like I just encourage anyone who's listening who is like, oh, like maybe you're just stuck in a place where this is how you've always done it. Just try a couple of these things, because I'm telling you, you will feel the difference. I'll never forget the day. And I told a story to someone else the other day because she said she hasn't had dairy in like 10 years or something, right? And before I started working with you, I was 8 years off of dairy. And I was convinced dairy is what gives you acne. Dairy is what is inflammatory. We're not supposed to have dairy as like humans. Why are we at all the narratives around it? And I ordered some raw milk. I poured myself a glass and I drank it. And I felt like my body was like, you need more. And I remember I sat there and I drank, like, for the first time having dairy in like 8 years, I drank like 3 full cups of raw milk. And I literally felt like my body was like, finally, like, thank you. You're giving me something that is actually nutritious. None of this like nut milk stuff. And it just changed my whole life. So I just can attest to everything that you're saying.
Oh, I so appreciate that story. that was me, at one point. And, I think, just going back to earlier in our conversation, like everyone is different. So like dairy is not going to work for some people, and that's just going to happen. But if you're avoiding dairy because somebody told you that you should, that goes back to like following your intuition and being able to get in tune with your body's needs. So just because somebody says something doesn't mean that it's true for you, and being able to discern that is going to be really important.
So good. Okay, we need to talk about prenatals, because everyone's like, what prenatal should I take? What's the best one on the market? And you have a completely different approach to this, which I think is genius, and it's what I did. And when people DM me to this day, what prenatal did you take, Erica? I send them your posts from your Instagram account. I'm like, just read this. But can you talk about this and why your approach to prenatals is different than what other people may think?
Yeah, absolutely. And, again, everyone's different, and everyone has their own sort of, what's going to work for somebody is not going to work for another person. So I just want you to know that, like, if what I'm about to say doesn't resonate with you, that's totally fine. But I think it's important to be informed about the decisions that we make, because I feel like we're sold prenatals as like this, insurance policy. In some ways they are, but really, like, if you think about it and know what's going on in there.
Listen, this podcast is called Trust Issues for a reason, and we have trust issues with society and what society typically tells us to eat, drink, live, how to work, how to be. And this is like the crux of it all for me, is like, of course there's an issue with, what society would say is like, every woman just needs a prenatal. And it's like, it's not, you can't just slap that on and be like, oh, this is going to fix all your problems. So that was I'm just speaking for me. I'm not speaking for Loren, but I'm saying for me, I had trust issues with it. And so when you introduced me to this idea, I was like, this makes sense to me. It made total sense.
Yeah. Thanks for that. Well, the first thing is, like, a prenatal is a one size fits all solution. So like it is, well, I can get into that too. But if you think about it, a prenatal is a one size fits all solution. It doesn't take into account your personal history, your personal metabolic needs, your personal dietary habits, which should all be sort of influencing what you take as a supplement anyway. You shouldn't be taking a supplement and then worrying about what you're eating. You should be eating and then looking at the gaps that you have and then supplementing that way. So it is a supplement, and I just want to make that clear. It does not cover all the nutrients that you need for pregnancy. So a lot of the daily values are based on men, as you know, women are well, a lot of the nutrient values, just assume that women are smaller versions of men. There's not a lot of good literature that it's actually based on in terms of needs for pregnancy either. All those values are pretty like loosely based. So I think that's really important to know. They won't have all the nutrients that you need either. So like the amounts or the number of nutrients, because any supplement company can make a prenatal and call it a prenatal, and there's no regulation as well. So just to clarify that, like just because something's called a prenatal doesn't mean you're getting a high quality prenatal that's been approved by the FDA. Like there's no FDA approval. They could put 2 ingredients in it and call it a prenatal. They could put 3. They could put 100. They could put 15. They could put different amounts. It does not matter. So, you know, just know that they're not all created equal either. I think it's also important to know that supplement companies are in the business of making money. Like some of them, sure, they want to help people, but at the end of the day, it's all about the bottom line. So like you have to imagine there's going to be a lot of cost effectiveness taken into account too. And how they get around that is by making sacrifices about the either amounts or the forms of the nutrients that they're putting in their supplements. So you will find either really, really cut down or what's the word I'm looking for? Really tiny amounts of nutrients that they say they have, or really poor, cheap forms that aren't going to work as well in your body. And I think that's important to know, especially if you have MTHFR, if you're like, what is that? You know, we could have a conversation, but if you're taking a prenatal because you think you need folic acid, that is a really important thing to note too. Like folic acid is very cheap. It's not great for really anyone. So, and you'll find that in most prenatals. So those are like the primary things. And then you have the nutrient interactions. So like every nutrient kind of has different partners and different things that increase it or decrease it, or they work together or against each other. And so I think it's hilarious that there are iron-free prenatals in the market because they acknowledge this one interaction, and that is, okay, calcium and iron compete for absorption. So let's make an iron-free prenatal. But they're forgetting all the other ones. And so you're, you know, when you take a prenatal, it's got all of these nutrients in it and they all compete for absorption. So you're not absorbing all of the amounts anyway, for primarily, this is one of the reasons, because they all compete for absorption in some way, shape, or form. And then it goes back to also, you know, the ratios are really important. And then depending on your diet and what that looks like and your metabolic needs, like, you know, you could be taking something that's pushing you more out of balance versus into balance. So that's, suffice to say, there's like a lot of reasons, you know, to be informed about, or things to be informed about your prenatal. Like it's not a solve-it-all solution. It's not necessarily a true insurance policy in my eyes. Whereas you can do something different, either with food or with food-based supplements. And nature tends to, not only do we like not know about all the nutrients yet, so we're constantly finding out about different antioxidants, different vitamins. Like, you know, we only really found out about folic acid and its importance in the 1990s. And I think selenium is like one of the other relatively newer ones, choline, and like all these nutrients, we're only finding out about them. So like really recently, and there could be so many others that we just don't understand or don't know about. And nature has a beautiful way of gift wrapping the nutrients that you need in a bow tie. and in the ratios that you need them with their partners to make them work better and function optimally. And this is why I really like a whole food based approach, whether it's whole foods or whole food based supplements. Of course, there's a time and a place for prenatal supplementation, but I feel like this is a much more beneficial approach, and it has really, I've seen so many amazing results from this approach with my clients and my students, that their placentas are like mind-blowingly healthy and their midwives cannot believe how healthy. They've never seen a healthier placenta. Or the amniotic sac is like the strongest amniotic sac they've ever seen. And it goes back to the whole foods. And so, there is another way, and you can create a whole food based either supplementation program or diet that really covers all this. But of course, that depends on, what works for you and your body. But there is another way, and you don't necessarily have to be beholden to a prenatal. And you can also mix and match foods and supplements. I'm not saying, supplements are bad. I think they're very therapeutic. I think they have a place. I use them. But, I don't use them in a way that I use prenatals, if that makes sense, or other people use prenatals.
Mm-hmm. It's like whack-a-mole, it's just like a big giant Band-Aid on a gaping, or it's like a tiny Band-Aid on a gaping hole. It's like, it's really not going to fix all the problems when you just got to heal the hole first. And I did all of that too. We were doing adrenal cocktails, and so it was like food stuff and trying to get, zinc and copper like in my food. And then I was also like complementing that with some supplements that I had already been taking, and, vitamin C and vitamin E and like things that were all whole food based. And it's so funny because I still have the photo of my placenta on my phone, because my midwives made that comment. They were like, your placenta, look at this thing. Like, it was so red and healthy, and like, it was wild to see it, because there's some that aren't. And I was like, just very proud of that placenta. So, and I can attest to that being true. When it comes to working with you, because I think we need to give someone the next step, because if you're listening right now, like, here's what my experience is. And I think that you have so many amazing resources on your social media. People need to go and follow you, because you give so much free value. Like, literally, I think I had stalked you for months before we ever even started working together. And this was like years ago. Like, even since then, it's like you've got all these other ways that people can learn from you. But I think if you're listening to this and you're like, okay, like, where do I start? Like, what's the next step? Like, I would highly recommend, number one, like, you need to go to Loren's page. You need to follow her. You need to like start soaking up this information, because I think a part of it is just kind of like awareness based. You just kind of start to have awareness so that you can, in your daily life, be like, oh, I'm doing this thing. Oh, I'm doing a little bit of breath work. Oh, I'm like being mindful of what I'm eating. But then the next thing is honestly, like, you need to go and check out Loren's course. And I think I just want you to kind of talk about conscious conception, because I know you've put like everything in there in a very specific way, in a very intentional way. And if you're listening and you're serious about wanting to be the healthiest, best version of yourself, like, I do think investing in yourself in this way is the best. And Loren's not coming on the show to be like, plug my course. I'm literally plugging it because I did it. I have your recipe guide, all the things. But like, if you could tell someone where to start and then like why you created the course, could you just map that out a little bit? Because I think each, like you said, every person's different. We're all unique and different. So what works for me may not work for who's listening. But I think if you have like the whole kind of base of information, the foundation, you can really take what you need from it and like really become your own advocate.
Well, thank you for that. And I think, yes, go to my page, just start, getting a taste for kind of, well, hopefully you got a good taste here, but kind of like an idea of my approach and philosophy. It doesn't need to be stressful, and I don't think that conceiving or pregnancy should be stressful, and that I really try hard to kind of like make complex things easy to understand so that you can be empowered to run with it. And so with conscious conception, thanks for asking. I wanted to bring this sort of one-on-one style of coaching to a group coaching program, or not a group coaching program. Let me say that again. I wanted to
it's okay.
I wanted to bring a one-on-one style of coaching to a course setting. And so what I have you start with actually is an assessment that helps you identify the different areas of your fertility that could either be in really good shape or that might need a little bit help, and that might need optimization to help you create the best version of yourself going into pregnancy. Because the different things that we talked about, like you might have your supplements on lock, but what about your pelvic floor health? What about your exercise? What about your thyroid health? What about your hormones? Like, you know, there are so many different areas that can impact your fertility, and just like throwing spaghetti at a wall and doing everything, it's a waste of time and money, but also energy. And like, if you want to conceive, you want to do it in the most efficient way possible. And you don't want to spend like, you know, a million years doing it or focusing on things that you don't need to. You want to focus on the things that you need to. So I wanted to bring this style of one-on-one coaching and this like sort of approach so that you can figure out exactly what you need to do to focus on and optimize your fertility for your best pregnancy and possible outcomes. So that's really what the course starts with. And the course has everything that you could possibly need based on your results. And so, you know, we cover, in my eyes, there are 5 really important areas, but, you know, we cover a lot more in depth. But nutrition, exercise and pelvic health, nervous system, your cycle, of course, that's really important too, and also lifestyle. And those are the 5 areas, but we cover things in depth, like, you know, cervical mucus production and vaginal microbiome health, egg quality, thyroid health, you know, how to optimize these different things so that you can, if you need them, optimize them to put your best foot forward. There's even information on conceiving over 35, which that's a whole other conversation we can have, and like trust issues there about what's said there. You know, conceiving with MTHFR, with PCOS and endometriosis, there's a lot of specific resources if you have these specific conditions too, and how to manage them and optimize them. So it's really the lay of the land. And again, that initial assessment will help you create a path and provides you with a specific path that you can follow so that it's very efficient. You're not like boiling the ocean, if that makes sense.
So good. I could literally talk to you all day about all this stuff because it's like so close to home for me. And yeah, I'm turning 35 next year and wanting to conceive again. So I'm like, that's going to be a whole nother interesting thing to dive into, because yeah, there's this whole stigma around now I don't even think they call it geriatric anymore, whatever the official term, what do they call it?
Advanced maternal age.
Advanced maternal age. It's like so ridiculous. But yeah, I think wow, that I actually didn't realize that you also had resources in terms of like, if you do have PCOS or endometriosis, you know, I don't feel like that's anywhere. Like the fact that you have all of that for someone to be able to have tailored information resources is gold. So where can people find you? Where can they come check out your page? What's your handle? Give us, and we will also in the show notes link all of this. So for those of you who are like chomping at the bit, you want to go stalk Loren now, you want to go check out Conscious Conception, we will link it. So check that out. But where can they come find you to start learning more?
Oh, thanks for asking. You can find me on Instagram primarily. My handle is Innate, and that's INNATE _fertility. You can also find me. I have a podcast as well, actually, and I'll have to have you on, Erica.
I would love to.
Maybe
that would be an honor. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that'd be so
fun. An honor.
We should definitely talk about that. But it's called the Innate Wisdom Podcast, and I talk a lot about fertility, but also just general health and wellness and how to really get back in touch with. I loved what you said, coming back to you. It's really about that and how to unlock, you know, your body's vitality. So that's available on, you know, the podcasting platforms. And then my course, which is Conscious Conception, and you can find that at innatefertility.org/get-pregnant.
Get pregnant.
Yeah.
We will link all of that for you in the show notes so you can find that. That's so good. I love it. I'm so grateful for you. I think the work you're doing is truly life-changing. If you could leave us with one nugget for a mama who is about to start, or a mama to be, I should say. I mean, I feel like you're already a mama in your heart when you are wanting to start this journey of conception or preconception, or even just like dabbling the waters, or even if you're listening to this and you're not even sure, because the truth is, and I'll say this so transparently, is when we started working together, I wasn't even saying I have this date of when I want to get pregnant. I wasn't even sure that I was made to be a mom, which is crazy to me now because I'm obsessed with being a mom and I can't wait to have more little babies. But you know, if you're listening and you're like, I don't know if like conception's for me, I do think that there's so much benefit that you can have of just taking control of your fertility, of your own health, of your own personal bodily awareness. So if you had one little nugget to leave us with on someone who is about to begin this journey, or maybe they're in it already, but they're still kind of testing the waters, what would you say to that person?
That's a really great question. And you know, what you shared too is completely normal. So if anyone feels the same way, like if you asked me 10 years ago if I wanted to be a mom, and I do want to share that eventually on my page, but I would have been like, I don't know if I want to have kids. And look what I'm doing now.
Literally so funny. Like, look at you.
Yeah.
Getting everyone pregnant.
Well, also look at you. You're a beautiful mama to a beautiful boy.
Thank you.
Yeah. But, you know, I think it really comes down to kind of what I said earlier. I'll leave you with two things. Taking charge of your own health, really understanding that you're the one in charge, regardless of who's making the decisions. So regardless of if you pass it off, and to really take some time to just get in tune and just stop with the do and like pause. And it might be uncomfortable and you might feel like you need to fill your time with something, but just get in the habit of, even if it's just for 5 minutes once a week, like just pause and just try to ask yourself, what do you need in this moment and what will fulfill you and nourish you? It doesn't have to be food. It can be just sitting there in silence. It can be looking out the window. It can be, you know, maybe you had to go to the bathroom too. Like, I don't know. We live in, you know, go, that like sometimes women forget that to eat. They forget to go to the bathroom. It could be as simple as that. Or, you know, if you want to reflect and meditate or write something down or say a little prayer, like that's beautiful too. But something for you that's unplanned, you don't have an agenda for that time period, but, you know, you can just be and go with the flow, because I think that's also really important when, you know, trying to just unlock your most vibrant self. So I would say that, and then just finding joy, you know, regardless if you are struggling to conceive or you aren't sure and you're really stressed out about it, like just try to find things that make you happy and really invest time in those things outside of this whole journey, because those are the things that are going to nourish your soul as well. And it doesn't always have to just be focused on like, okay, I'm going to try to conceive. My whole life is going to revolve around this. You're going to lose yourself again. So it's really important to just make sure that you maintain those things and can really be happy throughout this process too, because that'll not only be better for you, it's going to be better for your baby, whether you decide to have one or not.
Oh my gosh, that's so much good wisdom and a great way to wrap up the show. Thank you so much for being on, Loren. Like, just feel that you truly, like I said before, and I'll say it again, you just are truly doing such amazing, incredible work to help women just not only, yes, get pregnant, but just come back to themselves and to learn how to be in their bodies in the best way possible. And I think there's no better freedom than to find that. So thank you for sharing all of your wisdom today. And thank you for being on the show.
Thanks for the opportunity, Erica. Really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Trust Issues podcast. Make sure you check out our show notes so that you can learn more about your own fertility journey and follow Loren. If you loved this episode, make sure to leave a review and share it with your friends. We'll see you on the next one.